And when Elijah went off into the wilderness to escape Ahab and Jezebel, he lived in a cave. And then he heard a noise, and he went out to the mouth of the cave, and he encountered an earthquake and a fire and a whirlwind. But God wasn't in any of those things. It was only when he peeked out of the cave and heard a still small voice saying to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So the question I put to you is, what are the earthquakes and fires and winds in your life today? Are they struggles and losses? Are they pains and anguishes? Are you outraged about the world or merely disappointed in yourself? The question is, what are you doing here today? What brings you in this door? What makes you stand at the cave and wonder? Because that is the still small voice you need to hear. This is Fountain Street Church, and I'm asking you, what are you doing here, Elijah? As we rise to sing our opening hymn, greet one another in a way that you haven't greeted your spouse or your friend. Extend them a hand, a hope, a hug, or some other word with H in it as we prepare to sing our opening hymn.
Please join with me in the responsive reading listed in your order of service. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor and yet depreciate agitation are people who want crops. They want rain without thunder and lightning. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one. Good morning, and welcome to Fountain Street, this independent liberal church where we are encouraged and challenged to free our minds, grow our souls, and change our world. My name is Carol Koistra, and it is an honor for me to have the opportunity to welcome you to one of the most meaningful places in my life. If you are visiting with us today, we invite you to learn more about this church, to see if this is a place for you to belong. I first visited this church over 30 years ago, and I still remember that day. I tentatively walked into the sanctuary and took a seat in the back row. It took some courage for me to come into this place, given I had spent the first 40-some years as a member of the Christian Reformed Church, attending all those Christian schools. I had been warned of this place and its then minister, Dr. Duncan Littlefaith, for many years, and was therefore surprised and confused at my experience that morning. Let's just say that in spite of the warnings, I ended up falling in love with this place of worship and continue to feel that way to this day. A year ago, when our youth group asked us to give a word we thought represented our thoughts about Fountain Street Church, I wrote down the word beauty, something that is all around us and hopefully within us as we sit in this sanctuary. For those of you who know me, you know that music is a big part of who I am and central to my worship experience. I hear the beauty of our magnificent 8,000 pipe organ, some pipes seen, many unseen, listening to it played every week by our music director, Marilyn. This is a gift beyond description. I hear the beauty of the music gifted to us by our very own choir, led by our choir director, Steve Barton, and in the hymns that we are privileged to sing each week, and also in the many guest musicians that grace our sanctuary, like today. I see beauty in these amazing stained glass windows, given and maintained by generous members of this congregation over the years. I value the beauty of the words we hear from this pulpit each week, providing us with challenges and thoughts not heard before, the opportunity to meet some of those challenges. Thank you, Fred and Jason. One of the beauties I will always carry with me was during the 20-some years I sat up in that loft with the choir, listening to the elegant voice of our then minister, David Rankin, paying close attention to his every word because I could not see him when he was speaking. And every week, I see the beauty in the faces of you, my fellow worshipers. One of the final things my psychologist husband said to me shortly before he died was, "Protect your spirit." It's strange that after being warned about this place for so many years, that one of the ways I protect my spirit is by coming to this place to worship and to spend time with all of you sitting out there in those pews. I hope you feel your spirit is protected and nourished as you are surrounded by all this beauty as you sit here today being part of this service. Namaste.
Echoes the beating of the drum. There is a life about to start when tomorrow comes. We'll join in our crusade. Who will be strong and stand with me? Beyond the barricade, is there a world you want to see?
Then join in the fight that will give you the right to be free.
Do you hear the people sing, singing the songs of angry men? It is the music of a people who will not be slaves again when the beating of times at the end of your knockabout day, as the moon sets its sails to carry you to sleep over the midnight sea, I will sing you a song no one sang to me. May it keep you good company. bring me down today? Don't you bring me down today? Don't you bring me down, today.
You might be wondering why we're welcoming in Harmony. Well, all Fountain Streeters who are members, would you raise your hand? Yeah, we're a sizable part. So this is another organization where we are part of the wider community, like the Grand Rapids Women's Chorus. So we are seeing our own people ministering with other folks. I won't mention that Marty and Jeffrey and I also go to the same gym, and that's another matter altogether, but that, you know what I mean. And thank you for our choir taking part with them earlier and later. Just because I thought about it, are you going to the organ concerts every Friday? I was absent for the last one because I was out of town. But this Friday, Mark Loring of Second Congregational Church will be here, am I right? Music and food. Not a bad deal. Starts at 11:45. I saw the lunch thing here, but not the... So the concert is 11:45. Feed your soul. Then when you're hungry for food, go over there, and for $5 get well fed. And I want to emphasize what Jason said about the Mardi Gras event. A, it will be cool. B, you'll get plenty of food. C, there will be entertainment, and I mean some serious entertainment. And D, it's your duty. I expect to see all of you there. And if you're not there, I expect a note from you to come with your ticket and the friend you're giving it to. And why 2? Why not 3? Why not 4? Wendy and I will be sponsors for $100, which gives us 2 tickets and our name in the program. How cool is that? I'll see you there. And I'll have one more Sunday to twist your arm about it. If you don't want to feel guilty next Sunday, see Karen in the social hall after church today. So I was gone last week. I was at a meeting, clergy meeting of Unitarian clergy, which I still am, of larger churches, which I am. And it was in Santa Barbara, California. Oh my God. I saw the ocean. It's very Pacific, by the way. They call it that for a reason, nice and smooth. On the way back, we stopped at Point Magoo and looked at dolphins playing in the water. In between arriving and coming home, we saw the mountains beautiful up against the sea, and huge eucalyptus trees and birds of paradise, the flower growing wild. We got back last night, and I woke up this morning to snow. Who wants to go back with me? And yet I am glad to be home, because while it is nicer weather there than here right now, and while some of the ministers I met serve larger churches than this, and maybe richer churches or ones with bigger reputations, there is no church that is larger in heart, richer in affection, and greater in hope than this church. Like we like to say, Fountain Street Church is a place where you belong. And when I got on the plane, I had to go home where I belonged. I belong here. And here I am trying to say a few words that I hope will be of use and value to you. I don't know if they will. You have to help. And thus, I pray, as I do every week, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer. My parents have a very bad sense of humor, at least as far as my name was concerned. They named me after both of my grandfathers. Noble choice. It was a very noble choice. But it's also a very noble name. You know my name is Fred, but you should hear the full name. It's Weldon Frederick Wooden, a name best worn by someone 60 years or older. But when you're 7 or 8 and on the playground, Weldon Wooden is a target. Oh, it was hard to be Weldon Wooden. It was even harder when my teachers, people I saw 5 days a week, would forget my name. They'd call me Wendell or Woodrow. I even had a smart aleck history teacher who called me Well. It's amusing now, it wasn't then. Can you imagine your teachers not remembering your name? So in high school, I decided I would move to the less controversial name, Fred. But of course, in my era, the only Fred anybody ever heard of was Fred Flintstone, a cartoon character. It was hard carrying 2 unusual names then. I was always excited when I ran into a fellow Fred, never a fellow Weldon. And historically, there are very few who share those 2 names. So I rejoiced when I discovered in high school Frederick Douglass. We're not only name mates, he and I. We were both born in February, and we are both born in Maryland. Of course, he's really, really black, and I'm really, really white. But that didn't matter. He was someone worthy of living up to the name Frederick. He escaped from slavery on his own in 1838, north to Philadelphia and then to New England. He married a woman who he had fallen in love with, a free black woman, was counseled early in his adult career to leave the country, literally, because in those days the fugitive slave law made it legal, in fact mandatory, for even people in free states to apprehend fugitive slaves and return them to the South. This is the law that galvanized the abolitionist movement. And if you think that it didn't have much of an effect, anyone who saw 12 years a slave know it not only apprehended fugitive slaves, but freed blacks from time to time. And so he went off to Ireland until his friends in the abolitionist movement raised enough money to buy him from his owner, who reluctantly agreed to the purchase. Then he came back to the United States and took up a career of speaking out for his fellow slaves. He rejoiced at the arrival of the Emancipation Proclamation. He stood up for women's suffrage even when other women wouldn't. And even after the end of the war, when slavery was abolished, he kept insisting that it was not enough to abolish slavery. They had to be guaranteed their rights, something that we didn't get around to doing until 1964. February is also Black History Month, which is another ennobling feature of this too cold, too snowy time of year. We're in the midst of the American Civil War sesquicentennial, and we've been observing certain anniversaries. And so I have 2, 3, 4 very good reasons to lift up Frederick Douglass, but I have 2 reasons that aren't common. The first is that I believe he really is the American Elijah, a prophetic presence from our past, whose story includes some of those aspects that we find in the biblical Elijah. This week, Jews read part of that story, the part where he is challenged to prove that God is really God, and sets up a contest on Mount Carmel, from which we get the term Carmel. And 450 priests of Baal sacrifice a bull, and they put it on a pyre, and they pray for Baal to make it, fire come from heaven, and they do it for hours, and they don't succeed. And then Elijah does the same thing. He has the bull cut up and put on a pyre. He even has it doused with water 3 times until it fills a trench. And he prays a very quiet prayer. And now let me get the right words. These are the words that were read in synagogues. Then Elijah uttered a prayer, and fire from the Lord descended and consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the earth on which it stood, and licked up the water in the trench. My God's bigger than your God. And they all fell down and worshiped God. That's a great thing, and I'm only mentioning this because that's the text, but most of Elijah's career was spent hiding. He'd run off and yell at Ahab and Jezebel, and they'd try to catch him, so he'd run off into the desert and then come back only when it was safe. That's pretty much what happened to Frederick Douglass. He would utter thunderous words, deeply condemning words. I read his narrative over the last week, excoriating slavery, yes, and slave owners, yes, but also northern acquiescence, the cultured despisers who thought it was a bad thing but did nothing to end it. As Elijah heard the still small voice in the desert, Frederick Douglass heard the still small voice of his brothers and sisters and came back to America. A century and a half later, he reminds me that even though I can avoid the dangers of the current times, I am privileged and fortunate. Many others cannot, and those who can speak must speak. For example, in our nation today, in the rise of libertarian politics, I hear echoes of those Confederate times. We're now supposed to dislike the federal government and be all about states' rights and individual rights, and we still seem to hear the voice of social Darwinism that says if you're poor, it's where you belong, and if you're rich, it's what you deserve. And of course, like the old Confederates, we seem to be obsessed with purity, sexual and otherwise, and making sure the laws keep people from doing evil things with their bodies. And of course, the separation of church and state is keeping us from pursuing our Christian course as a nation. This is still a part of us. If we thought it was over 150 years ago, it's still there. And it keeps coming back whenever times get difficult. William Faulkner famously said that the past not only isn't past, it's not even dead. We have a Confederate, neo-Confederate resurgence in our country. And the voice of Frederick Douglass is asking me, what am I doing here? No, we don't have legal slavery, but do you know how many black men are in jail right now? They're in jail at 3 times the rate of they are in the population. Do you know how they got there? Well, not a few got there because they used drugs. They didn't hold up a store. They didn't commit a crime except using a drug, but there they are in jail, along with a few people who had a record even before they had a record. The ACLU is calling this the school-to-prison pipeline, when being suspended is now being handled by police in some states. And once you get expelled, that's a police record. So the first time you actually do get into trouble, that could be your 3rd strike. And you know what happens when you get your 3rd strike. You go to jail for life. And if this sounds like it shouldn't work, it does, in part because we've privatized our prisons, and our prisons need to have prisoners. And so we graciously supply them by convicting as many people as we can. We have 25% of the world's incarcerated population in our prisons today. We incarcerate people at a rate greater than Russia, greater than China. And the prisons are full of people to whom we pay corporations. Capitalism is a great thing. Criminal justice is more than, of course, the school-to-prison pipeline. It's also the war on drugs, which we all know has spent more billions than any other real war, and so far as I know has only succeeded in incarcerating drug users for being drug users. They also make very acquiescent prisoners. The problem of drugs, though, is still with us, even though it has helped build prisons. And of course, there are those 3 strike laws I mentioned. Do you know there's someone in California who's in jail for life for stealing $2.50 worth of socks? Yes. And finally, stand your ground. Stand your ground. I can't even say the phrase without a measure of trembling, standing your ground in the case of Michael Dunn, who stood his ground because he was afraid of three black boys in a car, so frightened that he thought they had a gun. And apparently the jury thought that his fear was legitimate enough that he didn't commit murder. Oh, he attempted to, but apparently he didn't actually do it. I could go on about criminal justice, but let's add a little more into that. How about education, or really mal-education of black children and other children of color? Like racism in general, there are many subtle aspects that make this issue pervasive and, yes, also evasive of easy solutions. But the result is that we create mal-educated kids of color, which helps them become less effective as adults, which gives them fewer choices in adult life. Education all the way up to college, as you well know, is far easier for some to get than for others. Back when I lived in New York, we were told we should put our children in gifted programs, and we said, but our children aren't gifted, they're just normal. I was wrong. They were white. Would we ignore inadequate fire stations in neighborhoods? Would we ignore inadequate sewers? But somehow it's okay for some schools to be less effective than others and underfunded. Why? Well, this voice of Frederick Douglass can't help but wonder if we aren't at least secretly glad that our children have a little more advantage than others. When black folk raise these matters and others, we sometimes say, well, they're biased toward their own point of view. They don't see the bigger picture. But do we ever ask if the laws actually are biased toward us? Yes, we, white people. Yes, slavery is gone and civil rights are better, but we should remember that Trayvon Martin was killed almost exactly 2 years ago today, and George Zimmerman did not pay. And this week, Michael Dunn, yes, was tried for killing Jordan Davis, also in the fair state of Florida. And the hung jury made it clear that he wasn't guilty of that either, at least not yet. Now, I don't have Frederick Douglass's fervency and passion and his legitimacy. I don't even have that fantastic biblical face. And in truth, I have no stake in this except my own personal outrage. The little I can do is very little indeed, and it's not to excoriate you, but to make you feel the voice of Frederick Douglass today. Because despite my age and race and position, the still small voice is in my head every bloody day. It's Frederick Douglass's voice, and as long as I can hear his name and share his birth month and his native soil, how can I remain silent? Yeah, this is Black History Month, and the story of Black America is far larger than Frederick Douglass, and you'll hear more of it as we get to next week. We're going to have a series of readings and pieces of music that celebrate Black history, some of it that you know and some of it that you don't. Some of you know about the Harlem Renaissance, but how many of you have read Langston Hughes or Richard Wright or Zora Neale Hurston? Do you know that the first published poet in America, Phyllis Wheatley, was a black woman in Massachusetts? Do you know anything about Rosewood in Florida, or Omaha, or Tulsa, or Buffalo, or Newburgh, or New York City, or the nearly 100 race riots that have taken place in this country since the beginning of our country? Do you realize that before there was a race riot in Detroit in 1968, there was one in 1863? Did you know, as I did not, that until this week, in fact, that until 1926, it was technically illegal for a black person to reside in the state of Oregon? Thankfully, they didn't enforce it, but it could have been. Thanks to our own Jim James's daughter, bless you, for being such a good dad. More people know about the loving couple, a black woman and a white man who got married, who were arrested for violating miscegenation laws in Virginia, having been married elsewhere, took their case to the Supreme Court and won, erasing miscegenation laws in the country. But what makes it good for us today is not just Jim James, bless you. It's that yesterday and the day before, a judge in Virginia used that case to explain why prohibiting same-sex marriages against the law in Virginia. So yes, black history is not only relevant, it's making a difference today in the Commonwealth of Virginia, not known as a hotbed of liberalism. And every month, Marie and I and Claire and a few others go down to Rosa Parks Circle, hold up signs saying, "When will there be marital justice in Michigan? When will you join us?" Must we wait until Mississippi gets the light? So black history is not just about blacks. It isn't even about history. It's about us, and it's about us today. It's our history. It's our heroes. It's our heroines. Now let me tell you about Weldon. That's by the name. I never cared for it much. After all, I was 7 when I started having been called Wendell and Woodrow. Then I discovered James Weldon Johnson. Who's heard that name? Thank you, Steve Barton. Give that man a cheroot. James Weldon Johnson founded the magazine that became the oracle of the Harlem Renaissance. He wrote wonderful poems, some of which you may have heard, called God's Trombones. And he wrote the words to lift every voice and sing. I own that song, too. My fellow Weldon and I, we're tight. I guess what I'm trying to say this morning, comrades, is that black history and its heroes are American history and American heroes. And it's not wrong for anyone, everyone, including us, to admire and follow them. Yeah, we already admire athletes and musicians, and that's wonderful. But they did more than entertain us. Who invented the light bulb? You think it's Thomas Edison? Well, he did help. But who did the work? Lewis Latimer, African-American lab assistant, who went through one filament after another until one of them worked. He also founded a Unitarian church in Queens, New York. Have you heard of him before? Have you heard of Charles Richard Drew? He's the one who figured out how to offer safe blood transfusions. Without him, thousands, if not millions, would have died. Have you ever used an ironing board? The African-American Sarah Boone patented that in 1883. Hundreds more. Overlooked by the history books we see every year in our schools, the schools that seem only to remember George Washington Carver and Martin Luther King. Vital though they are, they seem never to forget Edison or Whitney or Bell, especially Whitney. I'm also saying that we all have a little Frederick Douglass inside us, an Elijah in waiting. Every one of us has hidden from a hard task, dodged a duty, knowing that we were shirking it the whole time. Oh, we excused it. It's impractical. Oh, I don't have time right now. I'm not really good at that. I need to finish paying for my house, filling out my taxes, raising my children, doing my job, cleaning my doorstep. We all have important things to do. But the still, small voice of Frederick Douglass was there, and it still is. Every time you feel angry at the world. A few weeks ago, I handed over the chair of the Grand Rapids Urban League, a task I did not seek but was given, and went through a dark time with them as they went from a difficult period to the end of it. And I did nothing. I truly did nothing except hold the gavel and say, "This meeting is adjourned." But it was my job. I'm wearing their lapel pin today. And at the Martin Luther King breakfast a few weeks ago, to my utter astonishment, the new chair handed me an award for service. And for a day, Frederick Douglass wasn't talking in my ear. But today he's asking me, thinking of Michael Dunn, Jason Davis and George Zimmerman and Trayvon Lewis. He's asking me, what are you doing here? And that voice won't stop until it gets a worthy answer. And what's more, he's standing right next to you right now, asking, what are you doing here? What will you say? What will you say? That's all I got today, friends. Not a cheerful message, but a powerful one from a man who still speaks to us across all the generations, the American Elijah, asking us all, what are you doing here?
We're blessed to be joined by quite a number of young people today, and I want to speak directly to you in the form of a blessing. Go home tonight and ask the people who love you about your name. You didn't get a choice in that name. I didn't either. My first name is really John. But there is greatness in the history of how your name came to be. And if you are not a young person with parents at home waiting for you, then ask someone who loves you about your name and what it means to them. Be courageous with your name this week, friends. It was given to you for a reason. You were born to bless. This is your time.
Amen. So it doesn't matter if you love him, like I do, or capital H-I-M. Put your paws up, Grand Rapids, because you were born this way.